He was charming, articulate, young, a rising star in law school, with a winning smile. He volunteered at crisis hotlines and spoke eloquently about politics. But behind that mask lived one of the most chilling figures in American criminal history: Ted Bundy. For decades, Bundy's name has lingered in the true crime world, often detached from context, reduced to myth. But this story isn't about glorification. It's about unmasking the illusion he created about understanding. How he operated in plain sight, and how the world around him learned too late that monsters don't always look like monsters. Tonight, we'll explore Bundy's life not through fascination, but through education, examining the psychology that enabled his manipulation, the investigative failures that prolonged his crimes, and the resilience of the survivors and families who confronted him. Ted Bundy grew up embodying the American ideal of promise. Outwardly, he was polite, driven, and intelligent. Yet peeling back those layers reveals someone detached and expert in imitation rather than authenticity. Friends and coworkers described him as someone who could mirror personalities within seconds, a social chameleon. He learned what people expected and delivered it flawlessly. That adaptability became his camouflage. He smiled when he needed to, acted vulnerable when it served him, charming his way into the trust of strangers. Criminologists later called Bundy's behavior instrumental empathy. He could recognize emotions, even imitate them, but he couldn't feel them. That difference defined everything. Without remorse or genuine emotional connection, people became tools, props in a performance he directed. Understanding Bundy's psychology means examining psychopathy, a personality structure marked by manipulation, superficial charm, and an absence of conscience. Dr. Robert Hare, a psychologist who developed the psychopathy checklist, observed that individuals like Bundy often project a sense of control and confidence that masks deep emptiness. They manipulate others not out of necessity, but out of habit, a need for dominance disguised as belonging. In the mid-1970s, as young women went missing across Washington, Utah, and Colorado, investigators faced a mystery with no clear pattern. There were eyewitness sketches describing an articulate man with a cast or crutches, a symbol of vulnerability. He often introduced himself as Ted. In another time, this detail might have solved the case early. But without digital records or centralized databases, police across state lines weren't sharing data effectively. Each disappearance was treated as isolated, not part of a broader pattern. Even when Bundy's name circulated among multiple investigators, the lack of coordination left critical clues fragmented. It wasn't until survivors began to describe near-identical encounters that the picture started to form. The failings weren't just technological, they were cultural. Society struggled with the idea that a well-dressed, intelligent man could be dangerous. This bias that evil must look a certain way kept Bundy hidden longer than anyone imagined. Psychologists studying Bundy pointed to his profound need for control. For him, control was the essence of existence. His interactions weren't about affection or connection, they were about domination, about proving he could manipulate perception and outcome simultaneously. Even his courtroom behavior was performative. Bundy famously represented himself at trial not necessarily as a legal strategy, but as an extension of control. He sought the spotlight and reveled in the public attention, meticulously crafting his image before cameras that treated his trial as spectacle. But behind that confidence was fragility. Multiple psychologists have noted Bundy's deep insecurity, an inner sense of defectiveness masked by arrogance. His charm was armor. His crimes were the ultimate expression of his need for power over others. By dissecting his psyche, criminology advanced in understanding a crucial pattern. Psychopathy doesn't manifest in constant chaos, it often hides beneath stability, thriving in the ability to deceive. For every horror Bundy inflicted, there were survivors, women who escaped, fought back, or helped authorities identify him. Their courage turned the tide. In interviews decades later, some survivors described how they had to reconstruct their sense of safety, learning to live without fear dominating their every movement. They became advocates for victims' rights, calling for more compassionate law enforcement training and trauma-informed responses. The families of victims refused to let their loved ones be reduced to statistics. They spoke out, insisting that their daughters be remembered not for how they died, but for who they were: students, artists, friends, dreamers. Their words reframed public conversation, shifting attention from the killer to the people he harmed. Bundy's trial broke new ground. It was the first in U.S. history to be nationally televised. Overnight, the courtroom became a stage, and Bundy, an unwilling celebrity. The coverage revealed a dark fascination. Viewers were captivated by the paradox of the killer next door. Some saw him as brilliant, others as evil incarnate. What few grasped then was how dangerous this fascination could be. Victims' families often felt alienated, watching the public debate his intelligence or appearance more than his crimes. Over time, true crime journalists began to discuss the ethics of coverage, realizing that when the spotlight is on the perpetrator, the victims fade from view. This case reshaped media responsibility, spawning discussions about how to report crime without glamorizing it, how to respect survivors, and how to tell stories that teach rather than exploit. When Bundy was captured and later executed in 1989, it wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning of new awareness. His case led to improved national crime databases, interagency communication networks like Vice AAP, victim-centered advocacy reforms, a more nuanced understanding of psychopathy and manipulation. Most importantly, it forced a collective reckoning with complacency. Evil doesn't always shout, sometimes it smiles. But the legacy that matters most belongs not to Ted Bundy, but to those who survived him, to the investigators who refused to give up, and to the families who turned grief into activism. Their determination set the foundation for every reform that followed. When we tell stories like this, we must remember our purpose. It's easy to stare into the darkness and mistake it for fascination. But the point of true crime done right isn't to idolize monsters, it's to understand how to stop them. Bundy's name sits heavy in history, but the brighter lights belong to those who refused to let fear silence them. The people who built systems to catch deceivers sooner, protect victims better, and challenge our assumptions about what danger looks like. So what do we learn standing decades later in the quiet after his shadow? That awareness saves lives. That empathy is the antidote to manipulation. And that every voice, especially those once silenced, deserves to be amplified, not overshadowed. If you or someone you know has experienced violence, support is available through the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit RAINN.org for free, confidential help anytime. You've been listening to Shadows and Mirrors. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and remember, the truth is strongest when we face it together.